So, at the beginning of the story, we see a group of people standing in front of a house. And from their conversation, we understand that an elderly man's body had actually been lying inside this house for the past 2 months. Today, when the foul smell started to come out, the neighbors noticed it. That's why they quickly called the police. And right then, the elderly man's daughter, Hidemi, arrives. And then we learn that this elderly man had actually been living alone in this house for several years. No family members lived with him. Anyway, later, when the police take her father's body away from there, Hidemi looks at her father's bed and clearly understands that her father had died a long time ago. He had probably been lying there for 2 months. And here, the scene cuts. And then, on the other side, we see 3 members of the yoga service company. Their job was actually to take care of various elderly people in their homes. That's why they had keys to various clients' homes. Because when clients would leave their homes, they were tasked with entering their houses and taking care of the elderly. That's why they were given an extra key. The first member among them was named Sheba, who was a man. The second was Koda, and the third was Mariko. Anyway, we see that, like every Monday, they arrived today to take care of an elderly man named Himura-san. And since no one was home, they started taking good care of the elderly man. And then Himura-san's daughter, Mio, returns home from work. And when she sees that things are scattered around the house, she starts to tidy them up. Actually, Himura-san's mental state was slowly deteriorating. That's why he would often mess up things in the house. So, first, his daughter apologizes to them, because they found everything in disarray when they came into the house. Later, as they were heading back from there, Mariko tells Yuki, actually, his daughter won't be able to take proper care of her father, because she already has 3 kids. Plus, she has a lot of work pressure. That's why she won't be able to take care of her father for a very long time. However, while they were having this conversation, Sheba sees another one of their clients in front of the car who had come out of his house. So Sheba tells them, "You two go ahead with the car, because this client is very afraid of cars. That's why I'm walking him home." Saying this, he gets out of the car, goes to Himura-san, and gently starts walking him towards his house. And after seeing Sheba's immense love for the elderly, Yuki is impressed by him. However, when Sheba returns to his office, his manager informs him, "Miss Yumida's funeral is tomorrow. And since she was one of your clients, you should definitely go there." Later, the next day, when Miss Yumida's funeral takes place, Sheba, Koda, and Mariko all arrive. And after the funeral, they meet Miss Yumida's daughter, Rin, who is very upset after losing her mother. Then Sheba tells her, "You should take care of your daughters now, because wherever your mother is, she will be happy if she sees you happy." After hearing this, Rin feels even worse. She starts crying loudly. And then, on this side, we see the manager, who had many house keys in his pocket. And for tonight, he takes out Himura-san's house key. After this, we see Hidemi with her mother. She was eating with her mother at a restaurant. Actually, we learned that it's been a few days since her father passed away. And we also learned that Hidemi is a successful prosecutor. However, here her mother tells her, "Maybe I made the biggest mistake by divorcing your father, because you were very young at the time. It was beyond your endurance." However, we see that Hidemi doesn't answer. She was quietly listening to everything. And then her mother tells her, "I still don't know if your father is alive or dead. If he is, what condition is he in?" And from this, we clearly understand that Hidemi hasn't yet told her mother about her father's death. Later that night, we see that manager open Himura-san's door and walk straight into his house. However, we'll find out why he came into this house so late at night a little later. But the next morning, when Himura-san's daughter comes into the house, she is completely shocked to see that her father's dead body was lying next to the manager's dead body. Immediately after, news breaks on TV that the manager of Yaga Care Center tried to steal all the money by giving one of their clients an overdose of nicotine. However, in doing so, he also died. That's why this case is quickly assigned to a prosecutor. And we see that Hidemi gets this case. For this, she quickly calls Sheba, Mariko, and Koda for questioning. Here, Mariko tells her, "Our manager's name was Dan. He always had money problems. That's why he would often borrow money from people. However, then Coda tells her, I don't believe our boss, Dan, would kill someone for money. And then Sheba tells her, our manager had some bad habits, like gambling and addiction. That's why he was deeply in debt. But beyond that, I don't know anything. However, then Hidemi asks them, where were you all when this murder happened? Then Sheba tells her, I was alone at my house. I was reading a book and about to go to sleep. And then Coda tells her, I was at a restaurant. I had ordered food for myself. However, then Mariko tells her, I heard our manager's death was an accident. He slipped and fell down the stairs while trying to escape after stealing, which caused his death. However, then Hidemi tells them, we haven't confirmed that yet. The investigation is ongoing. Saying this, she dismisses all of them from there. And when they all leave, Hidemi's assistant, Coda, tells her, we found some fake checkbooks and accounts under various people's names in the manager's room. From this, we clearly understand that the manager was already stealing. However, then a question comes to Hidemi's mind. She was thinking, why did the manager plan to kill Himura-san this time instead of just stealing? It was already quite late. He could have just stolen and quietly escaped. However, then Coda tells her, maybe there was an argument between them about the care service or money. But then Hidemi tells him, actually, Himura-san never hired the manager for his care. But right then, Hidemi's senior calls her and quickly summons her to his office. And when Hidemi arrives in his office, her senior tells her, this case has actually gone very viral in the media. That's why I'm under pressure to solve the case as quickly as possible. Therefore, this case must be solved as soon as possible. However, then Hidemi tells him, actually, we still haven't found the motive for why the manager killed Himura-san. Besides, the injection found at the crime scene has been sent to the lab for investigation to determine if it belonged to the manager. The results haven't come back yet. However, then her senior tells her, this manager went to Himura-san's house to steal. But he accidentally killed Himura-san. After that, while rushing to escape, he slipped on the stairs and also died. You should finalize this and submit a report. However, after hearing this, although Hidemi wanted to say something, she was very afraid of her senior. That's why she just said okay to him without saying anything else. Next, we see Coda rushing to Hidemi, and he gives her a USB drive. And when Hidemi connects the USB drive to her laptop, she finds a video there. She sees that a car was heading towards Himura-san's house that night. And when she zooms in, she realizes that no one else was driving this car. It was the man named Sheba. For this, Hidemi summons Sheba for questioning once again. And this time, she tells him, you went to Himura-san's house that night, didn't you? Because we found CCTV footage. And according to the report, Himura-san died exactly 12 minutes after your car left the scene. I think you also went into Himura-san's house with the intention of stealing. However, since your manager was already present there, an argument started between the two of you. And you accidentally pushed your manager down the stairs. That's why he died. Because, first of all, the head injury you sustained tells me that. Besides, your blood was found at the crime scene. And now we've confirmed it through DNA testing. And then Sheba tells her, yes, I was there. And I did argue with the manager. But I didn't go there with the intention of stealing. And from here, the scene goes into a flashback. That is, it goes back to that night. We see that when Sheba hears a sound from Himura-san's house and goes near it, he sees their manager, Dan, who is stealing. However, after seeing him, Dan tries to explain to him. He was saying, look, I'm divorced from my wife. That's why I have to steal to give her money. I'm forced to do these things. So, please try to understand my situation. However, then Sheba tells him, but I don't get paid much either, but I'm not stealing. But still, we see that Dan tries to convince him in various ways. However, when Dan realizes that Sheba won't understand anything and will expose all his secrets, he attacks him with a lamp. That's why Sheba got a head injury. However, for this, Sheba also pushed Dan in self-defense. Because of that, Dan fell down the stairs backward and died right there. However, after hearing all this, Hidemi in the present asks Sheba, okay, I understand all that. But now tell me, Why did you go to that house that day? Then Sheba tells her, that afternoon, when I went to meet Himura-san, he seemed very anxious. That's why I was worried about him at night. That's why I went to check on him once. However, then Hidemi tells him, then when you went into the house and found Himura-san dead, why didn't you call the police? Then Sheba tells her, if I had called the police, they would have taken me in for questioning. And just like that, our company would have lost 2 staff members in one night, where it's already difficult to get time off in our profession. However, now we see that Hidemi and her assistant, Kota, didn't believe Sheba's words at all. For this, they go to his small house where he used to live, to investigate. After coming here, they find an origami swan and a Bible. We see that Sheba had marked a code in the Bible. And that code in the Bible read, treat others as you would want to be treated, because people will treat you the way you treat them. For this, after reading it, Hidemi puts the Bible down. Then she finds some of Sheba's journals, where Sheba used to write various things about his family and his work. After seeing these, Kota tells Hidemi, I still can't believe how dedicated this man is to his work. After this, Hidemi asks one of her colleagues about Sheba's family because she had sent him to investigate these matters. However, her colleague tells her, Sheba has no living family members or friends. For this, Kota researches the case a bit and uncovers some shocking news. He tells Hidemi, actually, when the police searched Dan's room, they found a total of 36 house keys there. However, after hearing this, Hidemi tells him, then we should go to those 36 clients and question them about Dan. However, then Kota tells her, out of those 36 clients, 33 have passed away. Only 3 clients are still alive. And after hearing this, Hidemi is completely shocked. For this, she asks him to find out the causes of death for all those clients. For this, Kota researches it a bit and finds out that in the past 3 years, approximately 69 clients from Dan's care center have died. This rate was very high. For this, Hidemi tells him, can you compare this with other care centers? Then Kota says, yes, of course, I can. After this, he extracts data from all care centers and tries to find out the mortality rates. And through this data, they learn that compared to other care centers, Dan's care center had the highest mortality rate. Besides, all the deaths were either natural or due to illness. However, when Kota checks the dates and times of all the deaths, he is completely shocked. He sees that all the deaths occurred around the same time, mostly in the afternoon. And all the deaths occurred either on a Tuesday or a Friday. However, after seeing this, Hidemi tells him, these cannot be coincidences at all. These are premeditated murders. For this, she asks him to check Dan's work history. And a little later, Kota tells her, I've checked all the history. Actually, Dan didn't have any shifts on Tuesdays for the past 3 years. However, another one of their employees had shifts from Tuesday to Friday for the past 3 years. And that person's name is Sheba. And after hearing this, Hidemi is completely shocked. And her suspicion falls on Sheba again. For this, she realizes that Sheba might be the killer. However, then Kota tells her, but we don't have any evidence against Sheba. We can't just accuse him. And after hearing this, Hidemi remembers that she had found a piece of evidence that they could use against Sheba. For this, she starts reading Sheba's journals carefully again. Actually, Sheba had written in detail about all his clients in these journals, even writing various strange things about them after their deaths. Now, through all these matters, Hidemi finds out the exact date and time of each client's death and tries to match them with Sheba's work schedule. And then Hidemi sees that Sheba was at work at the time of each client's death. And for this, her suspicion falls on Sheba. She realizes that Sheba is the killer. After this, the next morning, their coworker comes to meet Hidemi and Kota. And he comes and tells them, when we got permission, we searched every room of Dan's deceased clients. And now you'll be completely shocked to know that we found a secret audio device in every room. For this, Hidemi compiles all the reports found against Sheba and shows them to her senior, who had been trying to close the case quickly until now. But now, after seeing these, he tells her to continue the investigation against Sheba. After this, the next morning, Hidemi summons Sheba again and places pictures of all his deceased clients in front of him, who had died in the past 3 years since Sheba joined the job. Here, Hidemi tells him, "Your plan was completely perfect, but your diary exposed everything." Saying this, she starts reading some pages from that diary, where Sheba had written something about Miss Yumida and Rin. Then Hidemi tells him, "These journals of yours are written very meticulously. They even mention the days when you weren't on duty." However, then Sheba tells her, "But I wrote these based on imagination." But right then, Hidemi places that audio device in front of him, which the police had found in every client's house. After this, Hidemi tells him, "None of your clients' families knew that such a device was installed in their homes, which could listen to all their conversations." And after hearing all this, Sheba is a little more shocked. And from here, we go into a flashback. We see that when Miss Yumida was a little more ill, her daughter, Rin, was trying to take her to the restroom. But she started yelling at her, because her mental state wasn't very good. However, after hearing this, Rin's daughter tells her grandma not to yell. However, after hearing this, Miss Yumida immediately starts arguing with Mio, because elderly people's brains become like children's. But we see that Sheba was listening to all these conversations from outside with the help of that device. However, then, in the present, Sheba asks Hidemi, "But why would I kill elderly people? What would I gain by killing them?" Then Hidemi tells him, "Because you enjoy killing elderly people. You are a psycho." However, after hearing this, Sheba smiles a little. And he tells Hidemi, "I've worked for them for so many years and try to give them a good life. Did I work so hard to free them from such a terrible life, or did I kill them all?" However, after hearing this, Hidemi is completely shocked and asks Sheba, "You killed 42 people to save them? Even people who couldn't even take care of themselves?" Then Sheba tells her, "Yes, I did this because if I hadn't done it, their families would have done it a little later. Because I could clearly see their tears. That's why I wiped away their tears." And after hearing all this, Hidemi asks him, "How did you do these things?" Then Sheba tells her, "When I used to go to care for them, I would sometimes mix alcohol in their food or drugs in their injections. Because of that, they would slowly succumb to death. Actually, all the people I killed were at a stage where they had no desire to live. But their families were forcibly keeping them alive through various care services. But even when all their organs stopped working, those people couldn't die even if they wanted to. That's why I killed all those people and freed them from such a terrible life." However, through Sheba's words here, we learn another thing. Sheba actually killed 42 people, not 41. However, after hearing all this, Kota tells Hidemi, maybe the 42nd murder he committed was Dan, because Dan was also getting quite old. However, then Hidemi says, "No, he used to kill people who couldn't even protect themselves. But Dan wasn't that old. He could protect himself." Saying this, she flips her board over and starts reading about Sheba's career. Here, Hidemi says, Sheba took a job at a printing press after completing his graduation. He worked there for 8 years. But then he suddenly quit his job. For the next 2 years, he didn't get any job. But suddenly 3 years ago, he got a job at Yaga Service Company. But the question is, why did he leave that printing press? And then Kota checks the file and says there was a personal reason behind it for Sheba, which wasn't mentioned. But the most shocking thing is that the printing press also closed down within a few months of him quitting his job. However, after hearing all this, Hidemi tells him, "Actually, all these things are correct. But I still haven't found the answer to this question. Why did he quit his job at the printing press? And after being unemployed for 2 years, why did he suddenly take a job at this care center?" After this, the next day, Hidemi brings Sheba in for questioning once again. And this time, she had already learned everything about Sheba beforehand. For this, she tells Sheba, "Come on, let's talk about your family today. Let's talk a little about your father. Actually, we learned from your colleague at the printing press that your father had a terrible illness. That's why your father was admitted to the hospital. And he recovered very quickly and returned home from the hospital. But just a few months later, he started showing symptoms of dementia, which led to his death in 2014 after just 3 years. After this, Hidemi tells him, "After that, you killed 41 people following the same pattern. Actually, as you told us, you killed 42 people, that 42nd person was none other than your own father, with whom you started this series of murders. And after hearing all this, Sheba tells her, "Actually, my father raised me alone since childhood. That's why it was my responsibility to take care of my father. But I had very little money. That's why we both lived in the same apartment. And I took very good care of him. He used to sit at home and make paper airplanes and show them to me. And I would give him false praise to make him feel a little better. But suddenly one day, he disappeared somewhere. And after a lot of searching, I finally found him in a park. I should have realized then that his mental state was slowly deteriorating because he had started behaving like a child. I even tried a part-time job, but after seeing his condition, I had to quit that job too. On top of that, his pension was only 70,000 yen, which was only enough to feed one person in the house. That's why when I realized the situation was getting complicated, I applied for government assistance, but the government denied me that help. That's why I couldn't understand what to do now. Then suddenly one day, my father called me and asked to see my childhood photo albums. Actually, my father's Alzheimer's pain had increased a lot. That's why he was trying to forget these things. That's why he laughed for a long time looking at my pictures. But then suddenly my father told me, "Kill me. Actually, my brain and my body are not supporting me. That's why if I stay alive, we both will suffer and die like this. So, it's better if you kill me and free me from here. By doing this, we both will come out of this suffering and fulfill my last wish and free me from here by any means." However, after hearing all this from my father's mouth, I was completely shocked. That's why I couldn't strangle him to death. But when I could feel his pain, I killed him with a nicotine injection. However, after hearing all this, Hidemi asks him, "I understand your father asked you to kill him. But why did you do this to the other elderly people?" Then Sheba tells her, "Because no one caught me. Actually, when the doctors checked my father, they couldn't understand that he had been killed with a nicotine injection. That's why they said his death was due to heart failure. That's why I learned how to commit a perfect murder right then. And after that, I joined the care service. And I found all those families who were suffering just like me. After that, I freed all of them one by one from there." However, after hearing this, Hidemi, extremely angry, tells him, "Do you know how many innocent people you've killed in your delusion? Actually, even if they suffer a lot with their families, you don't have the right to kill them." However, then Sheba tells her, "All the elderly people I killed were tired of their lives. None of them wanted to live." After this, Sheba asks Hidemi, "Tell me, if what happened to my father had happened to one of your parents, what would you do?" And after hearing this, Hidemi remembers her father, who had been lying in the house for 2 months after his death. No one had even checked on him. For this, she calms herself and tells Sheba, "All the families whose people you killed had a family bonding. Even though they argued with each other, they loved each other very much. But by killing them, you destroyed their family bonding." However, after hearing this, Sheba tells her, "Only someone who takes care of their elderly parents will understand this. Do one thing, start taking care of your father or mother for a week, then you'll understand how painful it actually is." However, after hearing this, Hidemi shouts at him, "Stop it. Actually, don't try to drag me into all these matters." And after hearing all this, we clearly understand that Hidemi was probably feeling some guilt herself. After this, Hidemi and Kota go to investigate the houses of those whom Sheba had killed. Here, after talking to Mio couldn't believe that Sheba had killed her father, because he always behaved like a son to her father and loved the elderly very much. And after that, when she goes and asks Rin about these matters, Rin tells her, "After my mother's death, at first, I was a little shocked and very sad. But after that, I was also a little happy, because my mother's condition was really very bad. She probably didn't even want to live herself. But now, wherever she is, she's probably doing well." However, after hearing this, Hidemi and Kota are completely shocked, because what Sheba had said was slowly starting to come true. After this, at night, Hidemi falls into deep tension because of Rin's statement. However, then we see Kota come here and give her a paper swan. And he says, "My grandmother sometimes makes these. She's 78 years old now, and she's still healthy." However, then Hidemi tells him, Actually, I envy you. Because my mother doesn't like to walk by herself. On top of that, she also has Alzheimer's. That's why I have to go home and take care of her. After this, Hidemi tells him, when I was just 4 years old, my father divorced my mother. That's why my mother raised me alone later on. After this, the next morning, Sheba is brought to court. And when the judge gives him an opportunity to say something on his behalf, Sheba looks at Hidemi and tells her, it doesn't matter to me how many years of punishment you want to give me, because what I did was right. You told me I destroyed family bonding and didn't understand their emotions. Actually, the truth was there were constant arguments among them every day. On top of that, there was an extra expense, which certainly caused them all a lot of tension. Even if you ask, no one will openly share it with you because they don't want to look bad in society's eyes. Besides, the truth is, those senior citizens themselves wanted to die. But their families were forcibly keeping them alive, and they were also becoming partners in sin, from which I freed them. However, after hearing Sheba's words, Mio, standing far away, shouts, "You're a murderer. You killed my father." And this scene cuts here. Now, after court, Hidemi comes back to search Sheba's house. Here, she sees that origami swan again, which she hadn't noticed properly before. However, this time, when she holds it under the light, she sees some writing on it. For this, she later goes to meet Sheba again, because Sheba was now waiting for his death. Now Hidemi tells him, whatever nonsense you said in court today, you lost, and I probably won. But in one matter, I lost you. Actually, I've come today to tell you about my father. However, then Sheba tells her, but why me? Then Hidemi tells him, because just as you killed your father, I also killed my father. But I didn't adopt the same method you did. She tells him, when I received the news of my father's death and went to his house, I learned that he had died 2 months earlier. And for these 2 months, his body had decomposed. However, then I remembered that exactly 1 month before his death, my father had called me repeatedly, but I never answered his calls. Actually, maybe he wanted to tell me something. That's why if I had picked up the phone that day, maybe my father would be alive today. She tells him, my mother has Alzheimer's. That's why I didn't tell her about my father's death. However, today, when she stroked my head just like when I was a child, I became very emotional and told her the whole truth and apologized to her. And then I remembered you. That's why I went to your house again, and there I found this swan. And after seeing this swan, Sheba became a little more emotional. And he remembered something. And from here, we go into a flashback again. We see that when Sheba was trying to give that injection to kill his father, he became very emotional. For this, he hugged his father and cried very loudly, because he was in a lot of pain that he had to do this to save his father from suffering. But right then, he sees this origami swan next to his father. And when he checks it carefully, he finds a note here. And finally, then we learn what was written inside this swan. We learn that his father had told him, Sheba, you have taken very good care of me your whole life. I am proud to have a son like you. You never complained about anything, and you always supported me. And, until now, you have kept a father like me with you. But what you're going to do today is only for my happiness. So, you should never feel any guilt about it in your heart. I will always be with you. You will always be happy. And after reading this, Sheba starts crying like a child, because Sheba now knew very well that his father would never come back. And then, in the present, Hidemi tells Sheba, I couldn't be with my father in his last moments. But you were with your father in his last moments and supported him until the end. I didn't even pick up his phone at that time. That's why maybe you lost the legal battle today, but in this respect, you won against me. And with such an interesting dialogue, this entire movie ends here.